Good morning, everybody. It's just me on my lonesome today here in the hub. So you might have to bear with me at the beginning whilst I set myself up and make sure that I can see everything and hopefully keep an eye on the comments whilst they're happening at the same time as I'm sharing some revision activities. So first of all, I just wanted to start out by saying a huge thank you again to everyone who's supported us in the hub over the past year. We had our first birthday last week. And you know, it's been great. We love the hub. We love meeting people and sharing ideas and helping each other to develop. And it's just all great fun, really. So I wanted to kind of give a special shout out to all of those fabulous people who helped us with the webinars. So I'm just going to share my screen a second. That one. And yeah, so if you go to the website, you can find a list of all our previous webinars. So if you click here, and then you can actually, these are all the webinars that we've had so far with all these fabulous people who've come along to speak to us. And if you click on any of these images, for example, there's Fiona's one here. That will take you to the notes, and then you can click to go back to the Facebook page to watch the recording. Remember, all the recordings of all our webinars are available in the Facebook group. And then also one other thing that I just wanted to share, we've also curated all the Wednesday questions as well. Again, love these Wednesday questions. Some of them get more comments than others, but it's really interesting sometimes to see which ones are more popular. So the one this week, you know, what do you call the people you work with? Lots of really interesting comments coming out about that. But again, if you go to the page on the website, you can look at all of them. And if you click on any one, it will take you back to the Facebook page so that you can see what people have commented, and you can add your own comments. For example, this morning, I went back and I added another comment to this one. Because I noticed I was trying to remember, I'd seen someone do a presentation and really enjoyed it, and I couldn't for the life of me remember what conference it was at, because I've been to a few recently. I've been to Innovate and ASAIA and TESOL France, all really good conferences. And I was thinking, if I'd seen that person in a room, it would be so much more memorable, I think. So, yep, that's just a couple of things that we've got on the website for you. So do go along and check it out. Okay, so this morning I was going to be sharing some revision activities. I've kind of cheated a little bit because I called them revision activities, but really I think that they're activities that you could do at any point in the school year, in the term. They're just a different way of reviewing language, reviewing vocabulary, with a little bit of a game element to them. And so the first one is the bomb game. Okay, so if you're doing this in the face-to-face class, on the board, draw a grid, probably 4 by 4, and then put A, B, C, D at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4 down the side, and they will give you your grid coordinates. Okay, and then you can make a series of cards, and on the cards you can either have 5 points, 10 points, 20 points, or a bomb. Okay, and so then you'd put these cards with the number or the bomb facing away on the board, and then students divide the class into teams, and then students choose a grid coordinate, for example, A3. You turn over the card, and then they either get a question if it's for points, or if there's a bomb, you can choose 2 different ways of playing it. I always tell my students you can either play the friendly version or the vindictive version. So the friendly version is that if you turn over a bomb, you lose all your points. Not great, unfortunately. But the vindictive version is that if you turn over a bomb, you get to nominate another team to lose all of their points. So that one can get quite fun and quite messy. So you can do it that different questions are worth different amounts, or it could just be a random, turn over a card and answer a question, and that's how many points you get. You could always do it the other way around, that you ask students a question. If they get the question correct, then they choose a square and then they win that many points. That way is good because then you don't need to worry so much about having different difficulties of questions. And it also means that if you get a bomb, students still have to answer a question in order to get the bomb and then either lose their points or nominate someone else to lose theirs. So if you're doing this on, give me 1 second. If you're doing this in an online class, or also if you're doing it in a face-to-face class and you've got the tech, you could also do it on Google Documents, Google Slides, or on PowerPoint. One thing to be aware of with this is that you can't do it whilst you're screen sharing, because again, you would have your grid and then you cover the grid with individual squares. So each of these squares is a separate square. And the problem is that when you're presenting, you can't manipulate these objects. Okay, so it's better if you're doing it on screen to not screen share. So again, students would choose a square and, that was one that I didn't fill in, it seems. Oh no, I've lost all my squares. Oh, there's a 20. So I did this yesterday and I filled in some squares and not all of them. So again, you could do it that you have your questions separately. And so students just pick a square and then there's that many points and then they answer the question. Or you could do it that you have the questions on screen. So this would be good because then it's all there, it's all ready, it's ready to go. And it's quite easy to adapt, easy to edit once you've set up your grid. So then you could just have students playing it and then the next time you do it, just edit out what you want to change. So this one, for example, I've done with some idioms. Or some simple phrases, and then I think there was a 20 around here somewhere. There we go. So for example, with this one, I did when it was an easy phrase, it was just worth 5 points. When it was a slightly more difficult phrase, but there was a clue, there were 10 points. And then when it was a more difficult phrase with no clue, it was worth 20 points. Okay. One other thing I would recommend is having 3 teams. This is particularly for when you're playing the vindictive version, because obviously otherwise I'm going to take away your points, you're going to take away my points. Whereas when there's 3 different teams, then it makes it a bit more fun. And another way that you can do it is you can either have it that students, so for example, if team A uncovers one of the squares, for example, let's go, okay, so team A uncovers square A1. You could do it that if they don't get it correct, then it passes to team B or it passes to team C. And if nobody gets it correct, then that one's lost. Or you could do it that you just cover it back up again. And again, this is a great thing about doing things online. You can delete elements and then just undo and put them back on again. So that would be good for when it's this sort of activity where you've got the questions there. covering them up again, and then students could choose if they wanted to answer that question if they know that they're going to get the answer right. Okie dokie. One other thing I was thinking about with this is that obviously with it being a team game, if you're in an online classroom, it's much more difficult for students to chat, to confer, etc. Because you can't put them into breakout rooms because that would be far too faffy to put them into breakout rooms, come back, blah, 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 blah. And also, although you've got the chat box in things like Zoom and Google Meet and things, it doesn't allow for a group chat. So you can either talk to an individual or you can talk to the whole class. But if you want to have students kind of talking more secretively, one option could be to give each group a Google document. And then they can all access that and then have that as kind of their chat stream. Which I think, it's not only necessarily just for activities like this, but that idea of having a back channel where groups can chat, and it doesn't have to be kind of just one person messaging another person, or one person messaging the teacher, or one person messaging the whole class. It's another option for a way that students can talk in the lesson. And then depending on how things are in your in-person classes and how close students can get, again, it might not be feasible for them to be kind of when they're chatting about the answers. So again, another option could be to give them mini whiteboards, have them sitting so that they can kind of show their mini whiteboards to their teammates, but not to the rest of the class. And so that allows you to kind of socially distance a little bit, but still have that kind of element of secret discussion before they give an answer. Okay, so that was the first idea, the bomb game. And that one, actually, it came from a colleague years ago called Matt Walker. So thank you very much, Matt. And I wanted to say as well, a few years ago at TESOL Spain, I saw Kath Billsborough give a talk called 25 Years of Stealing Ideas, which I thought was a fabulous title for a talk. And that's basically what I've been doing as well, just stealing other people's ideas. So hopefully I've tried to kind of say where the ideas came from. But as they say, there's nothing new in TEFL. Okie dokie. Fantastic. So the next idea is 4 in a row. So again, kind of a grid idea, and similar to tic-tac-toe, 3 in a row, noughts and crosses. But the idea here is that students have to get 4 in a row to make it a little bit more difficult. And also it allows you to have 3 teams playing. It's better with 3 teams rather than 2, just because it makes it a bit more strategic. So for example, this would be a word formation version. So students would choose a square and then make the word, for example, 11, flight, or 8 could be tourism or tourist. One thing I would say about this is obviously it's just individual words taken out of context. So this might be useful if you're just focusing on language within a certain set. So for example, most of this is all about travel. But if you wanted to do it and have them thinking about other types of vocabulary, or to make it a bit more challenging, you could have them as sentences and perhaps not give them the clue. There's lots of different ways around it. Again, if you want to do this online, don't share, because then when a team wins a square, you can just click on the square and click fill. And then that fills in that square, and then the blue team goes and they get that one. And then the yellow team comes down here and they get that one. And so again, then they can try and get their 4 in a row, and a little bit of strategy and things like that. One other way that you could do this, and I might have to make my screen a bit bigger here. Hang on, slideshow. So this was, again, a four in a row game, but I used it over 2 lessons. So the first lesson we did the question formation, so completing the questions with the gerund or the infinitive, and played it as a game. And then the following lesson, I just projected this exactly as it is again, and then got the students to talk in pairs about some of the questions. So taking away the game element, but trying to reuse the resource as much as possible. This one, it was when I was working on an army base. So there's some weird questions like, what do you have to do when you're on duty? Why did you decide to join the armed forces? And because they were coming from all over Spain to come and study here on the army base, what's something you hope to do before you leave San Fernando? So yep, again, really easy to set up, just draw a grid. One of the benefits of doing this digitally is that then really easy to reuse. And like I say, you can do it with the, when you're not sharing. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button now. So when you're not screen sharing it, you can fill in a square with a color, which unfortunately on this one I can't because I took a screenshot of it, so that won't work. But generally you can do it like this and fill in the color. Obviously this is thinking about higher levels. With younger learners, you could perhaps use it to review vocabulary. So you could put a load of flashcards on the board in a grid, and then students have to make a sentence about one of the flashcards, like, I've got a black and yellow pencil. Off comes the pencil, and you could stick a coloured post-it note or something to show that they've won that square, and then again try to get the 4 in a row. Yep, so easy to do. One other thing that I wanted to mention really quickly, and I'm going to try, hang on, I'm going to show you this and then hopefully share it to the Facebook chat. So a few years ago at the Innovate conference, Sarah Priestley gave one of their 10-minute plenaries, really great initiative from Innovate. And it was all about, do students really want fun in the classroom? And so I think anytime we talk about doing revision games or doing games in the classroom, I like to revisit this blog post because I think it's a really interesting question. Do students want fun in the classroom? I think obviously there are lots of highly motivated, intrinsically motivated students out there who will come to class and will learn and will make the most of the opportunities, and don't need any kind of extra motivation. But then we all know as well that we've got those students that do appreciate a little bit of fun in the classroom. So obviously always thinking about the pedagogical element to your activities. And yeah, as long as the fun is there for a good reason and not just for a bit of edutainment. I hate that word. But as long as you've got a good reason for doing something fun, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so I'm going to try and share that. Oh, no, I'm not. I'll do it afterwards. That would be easier. Okay, so the next activity that's coming up is, it's called 8-way thinking. And this is definitely not a revision activity. You could say it kind of revises question forms, but more, I was thinking about this one for our students who have to do a lot of photo description. And sometimes it can get really boring to just kind of, there are 3 people, he's wearing a white t-shirt, a white and blue t-shirt, blah, 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 blah. So when I was sourcing ideas for this webinar, I came across this, which is from Anne Robinson from AFEIA 5 years ago. And it's an activity called 8-way thinking. So what you do is you give students an image and then get them to think of questions from 8 different perspectives or with 8 different things in mind. So that's people, feelings, action, sounds, numbers, sights, nature, words. So for example, with this photo, which I got from Unsplash, great resource for lots of images. So I was thinking a question for people could be, how do they know each other? Or how long have they known each other? Where did they meet? Etc. etc. The idea was she suggested writing 3 questions in each topic. For feelings, why is the person in yellow smiling? Is the person in yellow smiling sincerely? Actions, where are they going now? Sounds, are they next to a busy road? Numbers, how many steps are behind them and where do they go to? Sights, if they looked at the building to the left of the image, what would they see? Nature, how close are they to a green space? We can see a little bit of greenery in the background. And words, a question could be, what are their names? So I think that this is quite a fun activity because it gets students not only thinking about question forms, which is particularly useful for our Spanish speakers who don't use auxiliaries. We love to do as many questions as we can to get the practice in. But it also gets them to use their critical thinking skills because obviously they have to think of relevant questions about that image. And then also the next stage would obviously be to discuss their questions in pairs. And so that gets them thinking about more than just what they can see in the picture. So for example, that question of how long have they known each other, it allows you to kind of speculate, like maybe they met at university, or maybe they've been friends for much longer, or, you know, perhaps they're students who have gone to another country to study a language, and so they've just met. So, you know, they're perhaps not 100% comfortable with each other. There's one of them with a hand behind the back. So it's just a really interesting way of approaching photographs and getting students to think about things in a different way. For lower levels, obviously when they're describing the photographs, they don't need to speculate or anything about like that. But as they get into higher levels, there's more expectation that they'll be using a bit more variety of language. And so speculation, and perhaps it could be they might have just come from class. Any language like that can really help to boost their scores. And yep, so really easy, because as well in these activities, the pictures tend to involve people. So it gives you lots of things that you can talk about, even if it's kind of one of those landscape photos with a tiny little person looking out over the mountains. There's still lots that you can say. I mean, particularly with feelings, how would you feel if you were standing on a mountaintop looking out at a view like that? And obviously nature and sights, and yeah, so a really, really easy activity to incorporate into any class. So thank you very much to Anne Robinson for that one. The next idea that I've stolen from someone else from another conference, this one comes from Jim Fuller, whose Sponge Chats, Sponge ELT, I highly recommend checking out. But this was from a conference a couple of years ago in Malaga. And one of the activities that he talked about was devil's advocate. So again, I think that our students do a lot of activities where they give their opinion, they discuss, they learn how to interrupt, they learn how to reformulate. Oh, well, what I meant to say was da 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 da. And so devil's advocate is a really fun way of doing that. I'm going to stop my share a second because it's staring at a photo. So devil's advocate is a really fun way of doing that. The idea is that you, well, first of all, you elicit the sort of language that students would be using. So it could be that functional language, giving opinions, agreeing, disagreeing, reformulating, interrupting, asking for clarification. all of that wonderful language that we want our students to be using and showing off in exams. And then you give them some not necessarily controversial statements, but statements which will elicit a bit more of a response. And you can do this as well so that you tell certain students that they have to hold a certain viewpoint. So a couple of ideas could be cats are better than dogs. I know some people have very strong feelings about this, other people don't. But it's again, it gets students thinking and using their critical thinking skills to decide why cats are better than dogs. Another one, perhaps a bit more topical, Netflix is better than HBO Max. I've just got HBO Max and I'm quite enjoying it. I haven't had Netflix for a while, so I can't really comment. But for our students who are perhaps using those streaming services, again, lots to talk about, lots to discuss. Great as well for getting them to compare different apps. So Instagram is better than TikTok, and so on and so on. So I like that activity because I think, again, we get our students to repeat the same sort of language a lot, and we want them to be revisiting it, reusing it. But sometimes we just need to find a different approach, a different topic, a different activity to get them a bit more engaged. Okay, so my next activity, again, something that I've stolen from somebody else. This one comes from Pete Clements, and this is actually, I've literally stolen this. I've screenshot from his blog, ELT Planning, because we posted one of the Wednesday questions a couple of weeks ago about graphic organizers, and Pete commented with a blog post, and when I went to read the blog post, there was this fantastic idea about retrieval grids, which I hadn't heard of before. So retrieval grids, I'll share a link to the blog post as well afterwards anyway. In a retrieval grid, again, a grid with 6 by 6, and in each square, you have a piece of vocabulary. Pete's working in EAL, so English is an additional language. So he's working within mainstream education and providing that additional support in the English language, but through science and through other subjects. So that's why this topic vocabulary is all for science, and might not be what you'll be using in your classes, but I've come up with a couple of examples of how we can use them in our classes as well. So the idea is the students roll 2 dice, and they take one word. So for example, the example he's given is Milky Way. They roll the dice again, drop my dice, and put the second word, and then they have to make a sentence to combine those 2 words, or to find a connection between them, to find some sort of way that they can use both of them in the sentence. So, as I say, I was trying to think of how we could use it with our students. So I thought about, for young learners, maybe with vocabulary around animals. So animals, body parts, where they live, what they do. I'm going to see now if this works. So I've got 2 and a 4. So let's go for eat. And 1 and a 2, tail. Eat and tail. Dogs, they don't eat their tails, they chase their tails. So there we go. Dogs don't actually eat their tails. That wasn't a particularly great example, but I wanted to see if it actually did work as an activity. And I'm pleased to say that it does. I've got a 2 and a 4 again, and a 1 and a 4. So this time let's go for jungle and elephant. Elephants don't live in the jungle in Africa. They might live in the jungle in Asia. I'm not really sure. If I was doing animals with my students, I would know a lot more about animals and would be a bit more confident in my answer there. So yeah, really easy to set up. Can be tricky to think of 36 different pieces of vocabulary. But again, once you've got them, it's an activity that you can bring out as a filler at the end of the lesson as well, just to keep students busy for a few minutes. So you could do it that they write the sentence, you could do it that they speak, you could do it as a team game, so they win points in their teams. Lots of different ways that you could incorporate this into the class. And I thought something else then. Oh, yeah, dice. So again, depending on what restrictions are like, you might not be able to use dice in your lessons. Ooh, lost it again. You might not be able to have students handling dice in your lessons. There's lots of online dice rollers as well. I meant to look one up and forgot, but they are available and really easy. And then you can click or get students to poke the screen maybe with a pencil. And so then they can use the dice rollers that way. Okay. One other thing I was thinking with this, trying to use these retrieval grids with higher levels, this would be perhaps a bit less of a retrieval grid, because in this way the students would be rolling the dice and then trying to complete the sentence or to invent a sentence using these phrasal verbs. So for example, if they rolled a 3, 5, 3 and a 5, make out. So I looked into the distance, but I couldn't make out what the man was wearing, for example. As you can see with this one, there are some which are bonus rolls, because when I was prepping this, I couldn't think whether these phrasal verbs existed, like give after. I thought give over did, but it might not be relevant for our B2 students. And then, strangely enough, make after, I couldn't think of it being a phrasal verb, might be. And because it's a 3-3, I figured they could just choose another square that they could win. So this way you could do it that students just make sentences. It could be that you turn it into a kind of bingo game. So whenever they complete a line, they get to shout bingo. Again, lots of opportunities for ways that you can incorporate this into the class. And I am kind of keeping an eye on the chat on my phone. And thank you very much to Stephanie for sharing a dice roller. So that's great. And thank you very much as well to Rachel and Francesca for commenting. So a couple more activities to keep us going. Next one, again, keeping on the theme of phrasal verbs. So this is, it's called Jeopardy. If anybody's ever seen Jeopardy, the TV show, you get a word and then you have to make a question. So for example, if it said Panama Canal, the question might be, what is the waterway that divides North and South America? Perhaps, I don't know if that's the answer. But you can also make your own Jeopardy style games at this website, jeopardylabs.com. You don't have to sign up. You can create just a simple game without signing up, as long as you remember to kind of save the web address. Okay, so and then you can play it. You can divide your class into teams and then start. So team 1 is going to go for take for 300 points. So the idea here would be that they have to complete the sentence correctly. I got these trousers in the sale, but they're a bit baggy, so my mum's going to help me take them in. She's good with a needle and thread. Now, with this, if you remember the answer, if students don't get it correct, you can just press escape and you'll go back and nobody gets the points. If you go to correct response, then it shows it, and then you can award the team that got the points. Okay, that was actually team 1, but never mind. Another one, look out, that woman's about to cross the road. Check my answer, very good. Okay, so yeah, really easy to set up. And then also, just another one here, really easy to edit as well once you've set it up. So here you can see this is what it looks like on the editing stage. You can choose, it automatically gives you 5 columns, but you don't need to complete them all. If you leave anything blank, it will just not show it on the actual game. You can move things around. Hang on. You can move things around really easily as well. So if you decide, actually, I want that question to go there and that question to go there, lots of easy things that you can do. Save and finish, and then you can start. Okay. Easy peasy. Right, I've got 2 more games to show you, 2 more activities to show you, and then a couple of snazzy things that I found whilst I was prepping this. So going back to dice, I'm going to make my screen a bit bigger. So I created a few dice game a while back because, again, I thought they were a useful way of revisiting the same language again. Yeah, this is one of those things where there is a fun element just because students get to roll the dice, but really it's just the same as giving them a list of questions. So with this one was for the Trinity ISE Foundation. So with this one, students would roll the dice twice, or roll 1 dice, roll 2 dice once, or 1 dice twice. So I got a 2-1. So I could ask my partner, what did you enjoy about your school when you were a child? So with this one, with it being for the ISE, I had the language functions across the top, and then the topics down the side, and then just created questions to match each square. You could as well, obviously, get the students to do the game creation. So you could give them maybe not the whole board, maybe divide the class into 3 groups, give each group 2 columns to complete. So as well, they're getting that practice of writing questions, collecting all their questions, make it into a nice dice board, and then the next lesson they can play. The other ones I did this was for young learners starters exam. So again, I think because these are the sorts of questions that students are going to get asked in the exam, probably, or these are the typical questions that can come up, it's just a way of building them into our routines. So you could project this at the start of the lesson and each student answers a question, or, similarly, you could have your questions on lollipop sticks, which I've got somewhere around here, or you could have questions on Post-it notes on their chairs, any different way that we can find of reviewing the same language, but just adding a bit of a twist. So it's not just always the teacher standing at the front saying, when's your birthday? How many children are there in your class? So I think this is less about the fun element and more about variety. And one other one that I did was, so this was a B1 level. This one, similarly to the one before, it didn't have any particular categories. I was just thinking about the typical questions that came up in the exam. And as you can see, it's quite old because I don't think they have to spell their surname anymore, but they used to. I'm so glad they got rid of that. Okie dokie. So one more activity. I've kind of been blibbling through this. It's a shame we can't play them, but never mind. So this one is Battleships. Well, it's my version of Battleships. because in the original version of Battleships, you again have a grid, and then you have different boats, and then people have to say a grid coordinate like A3. And if you've ever seen Bill and Ted, excellent moment when they're playing Battleships with Death, and he says, "You've sunk my battleship," which is one of my favorite lines ever from a film. So this one, it's a bit different, and it gets students to use a lot more language. The idea of this is that you could either use it to review emergent vocabulary. So when you've been collecting vocabulary during the lessons, putting it in your vocab box or doing different things with it, or you could use it to review vocabulary from a particular topic, from a particular unit. So there's two ways you can do this. Either students can have the same vocabulary on their boards, but you might kind of put it in different order, or they can have different boards, but both students need to know what language the other person has. So for example, imagine I'm student A, this is my board, and then these are my partner's words at the bottom. Okay, so my partner has another board with these 20 words in. So the way that vocabulary Battleships works is you choose 4 or 5 squares, however many you like, and you draw a little battleship in those 5 squares. Now, I think in the original game, you could have like different lengths of ships. So you would maybe have one ship that covered 3 squares and then another ship that covered 2 squares. I always tell my students that they just have 5 ships in 5 squares. The squares can be touching or not. They can be in a line or not. Any 5 squares can be any 5 ships. And so then they're keeping their board a secret from their partner. And then their partner describes one of the words. So for example, this is, what should I go for? This is a piece of music that you often hear on the radio when there's an advert or when they're advertising the radio station. Okay, so then your student goes, jingle. So, no ship, water. And then person B, so then person B looks at the words at the bottom and says, okay, so this is an adjective. It means amazing, fantastic, wonderful, very grand. Oh, look, Karen got jingle. I'm glad I managed to describe a word. Yep, so that one would be magnificent. Oh, yeah, you sunk my battleship. And then the idea being that you play and the first person to sink their partner's 5 battleships is the winner. So again, one thing that I like about this is it just gets students talking. You could do it that another way to do it could be that they make a sentence but miss out the word. So for example, I need to sort out my travel for my trip to the US next year. Any way that you want to do it to get students using the vocabulary, it's good because then the partner has to listen, and it just has that little game element as well. Fantastic. So I didn't mean to stop my share actually. Hang on. So you might have noticed just at the bottom there, I had this little sailboat. So I've shared all my games, but there were 2 more quick things that I wanted to share with you. One is auto draw. And this is great, not necessarily to be using in your lessons, but I just think it's a fantastic website. So with this, you can draw something. Ooh. And then look at the pictures at the top and it will say, did you mean this type of boat, or did you mean this type of boat, or did you mean that type of boat? So if you're not very good at drawing, but you want to include some little clip arty type things on worksheets or on PowerPoint presentations, etc., then that's a really good site. And one other site, when I was trying to find this site, I came across another site, which is called Quick Draw. And this one I think you could use with your students, or not use in the class, but tell your students about to use at home. You can change the language down here, so get them to play in English. And the idea is that the computer tries to guess what you're drawing. Hang on, let me check. Have I got my sound shared? Share sound. It might be a little bit noisy. My apologies if it is. So I have to draw a giraffe.
I see street light. Or golf club. Oh, I know, it's giraffe.
It's great. I was hooked playing this last night. The voice is a
Oh, I know, it's square.
Oh, that's quite a tricky one. But so this will be interesting to see if she gets it.
I see line. I see nail. Oh, I know, fit stitches.
But so yeah, so really just a fun activity that your students could try at home to practice some vocabulary and just have a bit of fun, really. That one is just for fun. Cool. Excellent. So yeah, so the first one here was auto draw. I'll share all these links now in the chat, in the comments. Thank you very much to everyone who's been watching and for everyone who's been commenting. In a couple of weeks' time, Simon's going to be coming along. He's going to be revisiting a talk that he gave at AFAIA about making ELT more inclusive. And we're thinking of doing it as a more open webinar. So we'll have other people in the room, but we'll still be live streaming to Facebook. So I'll post details of that in a couple of weeks' time. Coming up next week, we'll be back on Thursday with our coffee breaks, morning and afternoon. For me in Spain, it depends where you are in the world. And as always, we have our Wednesday questions coming up each week. So thank you very much for everyone who's been watching this morning. If you're watching on catch up, leave a little hello and a little hashtag catch up. And I'll jump on now and share some of those links. Have a wonderful day, everybody.